Hello and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to this week's edition of the North Coast Journal. I am your host, Tanya Schrum, and we are joined by our California local journalism fellow, Kelby McIntosh. It's the Kelby and Tanya show. How are you doing?
Is.
Are you ready for the spotlight, Kelby?
I mean, limelight, spotlight, they're all lights. I'm here for it. So, yeah.
All right. Well, let's get your name and lights and talk about what's coming to this week's cover story.
Oh, so we have a very interesting cover story coming to this week's issue of the Journal, especially one that's been talked about throughout the community, which is just how Eureka City Schools email shed light on the Jacobs property swap, which has been a really big conversation to note. Thanks to Thaddeus Greenson's reporting, we find out that these documents were initially asked for but didn't exist, and they were actually exempt from the disclosure because they were attorney-client privileged, as well as the grand jury report on the property exchange deal then mentioned that they were reviewed intensive emails by Brad Johnson, a lawyer for the mystery developer and district staff. And through his reporting, he found out that when then asked Eureka City Schools if they wanted to reconsider the response to us specifically, the district provided a 246-page redacted documents. And all this goes into great detail in his cover story about just this molehill of different exchanges of emails and just where the ball truly got dropped when it came to this cover story the most. I think one of the biggest things that really took me off is that the documents themselves were redacted improperly, leaving text visible. The district had intended to black out, but based on advice from and learning and talking to Thad, based on advice from our attorney and our own legal review, like a lot of us, we believe that much of the district intended to redact is not actual attorney-client privilege information. So that's why Thad reported on it more than anything else.
Right. I think it's interesting that, the Journal went to their own counsel before reporting on this information. But I know this story started before you started joining us, but we've been referring to it as kind of revealing that Scooby-Doo villain. And so Thad got some more information for us on who's behind the masked man.
Yes, exactly. And through his reporting, you understand that the district attorney appeared to believe they were negotiating with Rob Arkley. The district seemed much more interested on the money side of the transactions than the property would inquire in the exchange. But I also understand too is that the email seemed to indicate that the district's thought about Rob Arkley was the purchaser in early November, saying that, but in actuality, how can I rephrase this? Apologies, Tanya.
You're fine.
Lord have mercy. Called the car outside. It said the email seemed to indicate that the district lawyers thought they were talking to Rob Arkley, the purchaser, in early November. But in actuality, I'm getting back to my notes here because this is a really dense kind of topic. But from what was alleged in the emails, it said the district seemed much more interested in the money side of the transaction than the property it would acquire in the exchange. And it seems clear that the lawyers was acting as the district's negotiator, not the superintendent, as the district had previously said.
Absolutely.
Mhm. But also too, within that, this is just a really dense topic that it made the cover for a reason. And also too, it's all this new unearthed information is just coming to light, and for us to have to be advised with our own legal team in terms of just covering all this new information, not wanting to allege real villains, but also to trying to make sure that we cover everything, really shows the scope and the magnitude of, number one, how important this story is, but also to the needle in the haystack nature of this Scooby-Doo like mystery that you just alluded to.
Right, and I obviously don't want to allege anybody's a villain or what their intentions are until all the facts are on the table.
Exactly. Exactly, more than anything. So yeah.
But what also came out in the article is that, the grand jury was involved in assessing this situation, and it does seem like this whole deal was not properly handled.
Yes,
And,
yes, that is
and
very correct.
the reporting just continues to highlight that.
Hmm. So it is definitely for sure, and I'm glad that you alluded, and it goes back to a statement that I made earlier, is that a lot of these documents that they thought fell under this client protection actually did not. And it's through that actual advising and what gets mentioned also too in the article is that a lot of these redacted documents were improperly redacted. So as much more information is coming to light and a lot more information is being released, we're able to cover it in a way more detailed manner than which we had previously covered this article before. I mean, though this situation has happened well before I've gotten here, it's through Dad's writing and understanding just kind of how this coverage has. It's definitely, I can see why this is a big community need to understand this information, because not only was it a lot of improperly redacted things, but also too there was no input from the community of which all this was happening, which from what I understand through talking with Thad, as well as just getting an understanding of the context around this piece, you're talking about area of residents that had a lot of kind of say so and input on what happened. So for this to happen and not be included in the conversation, I can definitely see like the importance of this reporting, and also to the revealing of new reporting more so than ever.
Well, and also the very important place where Eureka is in its growth, and how the growth is going to take shape. Is it going to be more important to have parking for businesses, or also have residential buildings, and maybe a mix of both? And it definitely seems like a certain entity has definitely putting their finger on the scale.
Exactly. 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 And I like that you brought up that point, is because growth is definitely been the major topic of conversation for development for Eureka. And I know it's from my time of coming here, that was one of the first big conversations that I noticed, was the development of parking versus housing, and this kind of battle that's been happening between making the choice of the two. And I think something like this does actually speak, as you mentioned, towards the bigger picture of how we see Eureka in the future, and these kind of infrastructure things happening for the greater good.
And in a lot of the growing areas, I mean, there's this definitely goes on in other towns in our area, but this is definitely our highlight right now. And it's been amazing reporting from Thad to bring us what he has learned as he's been developing this story over the course of the last year in the journal.
Exactly.
Well, before we move on to our next story, do you have any final thoughts about the cover story this week?
Go read it. It's I can, as a person, as one of the second eyes to get, as one of the second people to get eyes on this story and be part of the process of understanding like how it gets edited and everything else. It's such a beautifully written piece. Excuse me. It's such a beautifully written piece to where like, please inform yourself on what goes on, not just the information itself, but it's the cover for a reason. That's the best thing I could say. It's the cover story for a reason, and it's worth getting a copy of the journal just to read it to understand what's going on in your community.
Well, as I do every week, I encourage everybody to pick up this week's journal and read it cover to cover. We have such high caliber in our North Coast Journal staff, and we are very grateful and fortunate for their efforts. And that includes you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Would you like to tell us what's coming to the Arts and Features beat, starting with that Garden Party in a Cup by Amy Ogle?
Yes. Oh my God. Summer is here, and I don't know about y'all, but nothing beats the summer heat like a refreshing cocktail. I've just started exploring the cocktail scene of Humboldt, and for me, like seeing this just gives me another kind of checkbox to add to my list of places of drinks to have and places to like actually visit more than anything else. And for this, like to hear about the planter box, like my mezcal with herb, mint, lemon, balm, basil, thyme, and cilantro all at work in a variety. Yes, please. Like
I even like the idea of throwing some pepper in there. Really kind of blew me away.
Yes, I get why it sounds like a salad in a cup. But like looking at all the ingredients, and my mouth is just like ready to just wrap my lips around this drink and just enjoy, especially like since, well, I mean, sun's out kind of now, but it just to celebrate the sun when we get it sometimes, like I'm here for it. And it says that like I love just some of the things that has been mentioned in the article, that is just from that the bartender just keeps in the garden, from edible flowers, sun gold tomatoes, berries, future pickles, like all these kinds of things that just homogenizes to make a mojito heaven. And I just love that for mojito head. I'm getting thirsty just thinking about this article.
No, the thing that really stood out to me is her describing it as the bartender's garden that she has. And I just said, I think that's something we all should strive for in our gardening.
Yes. Yes. And so like to not only see this, but then just have this kind of recipe in the back of the book. I feel like as a connoisseur of cocktails and drinks and all these kinds of things, this is definitely one to put on your list to either make yourself or try. I think this concept of a cocktail is really dope, and especially for just some of the different ingredients that's used. As like I never would have thought that like pepper would be anything remotely associated to a cocktail of some kind. But I'm also a cocktail novice, so you know, to the watchers and listeners, like just know I'm inexperienced, but to see this, it definitely is something for me. Like I want on my list of drinks to try for sure.
And I think it's fun to encourage everybody to get creative with some cocktails in the summer instead of just reaching, for something easy in the sunshine, like a nice cider or a beer. Like, actually break out the muddling tool and get creative with it.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, though we're talking about cocktails and drinks, like looking at the pictures of it, it looks like a piece of art. Like, it is a piece of art in a cup. And yes, I think I agree. For those cocktail people out there, yes, I get you can grab a cider, you can grab a beer, but what muddle your way into something fancy for sure, and try this drink. And the recipe can be found in the back of the book of this latest issue of the journal.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Amy. She always brings us the recipes to try. Well, and with that, we're going to turn our attention back to the news and discuss the article regarding the shakeup at Cal Poly.
Yes, yes. This fool, as I was there, so this story holds really dear, and so to see this like being reported on the way that it has, uh, Jackson's retreat, I think, speaks so much to just so many different instances that has happened before I've gotten here to Humboldt, but also to just the handling of recent events that has happened too, as well, such as the Cal Poly protests for Palestine and all these kinds of different things. And so to understand that a normal retreat, and from what I've gained from this article, is that normal retreat clauses happen for professors that go on to higher tenure positions. So this is something that's different because this is a lateral move more than anything else. But even though it's a lateral move, it's still a lot of confusion because he's not listed as teaching any classes. He's not listed in the fall to teach any classes, but he's retaining a tenured professor title more so than ever. And it's just these kinds of things for me that I'm learning more so than ever. When I was there, excuse me, 3, 2, 1. When I was there, actually, like, reporting and capturing sound for a story I was doing for another newsroom, just understanding the public reception to how this situation was handled with the protest, understanding community reception, but also to, as mentioned in the article, witnessing the teachers come together and sign a letter for him to step down. All these were different factors. And though he was lauded for some of the more advancements made through the school, such as like the polytechnic side, as well as raising funds for stuff, there's also been some criticism of some of the things that he's done as well, such as mentioning how he handled the protests, but also to blocking out certain organizations from buying through land purchases, and all these kinds of different things that have brought into criticism of what he's done. And so while this can be seen as maybe a victory for some, there still is kind of a lingering in the air of what's going to happen for him, especially since it's a step down role more than anything else.
Well, and it's interesting. I think that the article was buttoned with a lot of thoughts that perhaps the next administrator will bring a more Humboldt-esque, more welcoming and, arena to the college again.
Yes.
I don't know if Mr. Jackson ever quite fit the area, and bon voyage.
That is a very good point. And I do think that whoever they bring on, I think that is a big weighing factor to the new person. It's just getting back to that welcoming Humboldt feel of what the school truly represented, and what the school wants to represent for the future. I know it's kind of there. Through understanding the article, Jackson had kind of these lofty goals of doubling student attendance, and though like applications were at a record high, the numbers just didn't make sense. And so I know that whomever they get, they will have their own sets of issues that come with it. But I know for them, the biggest point was actually making sure that the whomever they get has that returns back to that Humboldt feel, like as you mentioned before. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because Humboldt does have its own unique feel, and I would love to see the campus go in that direction, for not only just as a person that just lives in that area and talks to a lot of students in that area, but also too, it's just been vocalized by just the community and the students that reside in that area too.
Well, and the Journal did an amazing job of reporting on some of his controversies before the protests were even kind of the mainstay. And so I'm happy. I don't think any of us are surprised that he's moving on for other pastures. I definitely am appreciative of the reporting, and kind of the article really does a good job of highlighting some of the aspects of university administration that, you know, maybe most people wouldn't be aware of. Mm-hmm. So I definitely encourage everybody to stay informed and read the articles, and, you know, catch up with what's going on up at Cal Poly on the Hill.
Exactly. And all this and more, all this great reporting and more can be found in the latest issue of the Journal. And though we're having a conversation about it, like the articles are well written reporting that dives so deep into the numbers and just so many different points that I love the phrase that you use, like button up within it, that just makes such for not only a well-rounded reading experience, but gives so much context to some of the stuff that you may not see as a person that's not on campus, or just might have missed through all the different types of reporting happening on it. So for sure, it's worth picking up and it's worth going to your local newsstand and picking up the latest issue.
It's always one of my favorite things to do every week. Well, Kelby, thank you. This was great doing the one-on-one this week. And I thank everybody. That wraps up our time for this week. The current edition of the North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick up your copy today, or of course you can find it online at northcoastjournal.com. I am Tanya Shrum. Thanks for being with us and staying informed and supportive of our North Coast community.